A marine biologist descends into the waters off South Africa, conducting routine research, when a massive tiger shark appears. The shark circles once, then again, each time getting closer, more aggressive. Without warning, it charges, slamming into the equipment and knocking the diver off balance. The tension escalates as the shark returns, more relentless than ever. What caused this sudden burst of aggression from a normally calm predator? The answer is more terrifying than you think. On the morning of February 19, 2001, the coastal town of Byron Bay in Australia awoke to the aftermath of a fierce storm. The beach, usually pristine and calm, was littered with debris, and the waves remained choppy and unpredictable. As the locals began their day, walking their dogs along the shore and surveying the damage, no one anticipated what was about to unfold. One of those early risers was Tom Harris, a longtime resident of Byron Bay, out for his daily walk with his golden retriever Marley. Marley was a playful, energetic dog known around town for his boundless curiosity and friendly nature. As Tom strolled along the sand, Marley dashed ahead, nose to the ground, following some scent that had caught his attention. Tom called after him, but Marley was already too far ahead, barking excitedly at something near the shoreline. When Tom caught up, he saw what had grabbed Marley's attention: a massive great white shark stranded on the beach. The shark's body, easily over 15 feet long, lay motionless on the wet sand, its gills struggling to breathe. It was a sight Tom had never imagined he'd see so close to town. Marley, undeterred by the size of the creature, was circling the shark, barking and digging at the sand around it as if trying to figure out how to help. Tom felt a jolt of fear and wonder. Great white sharks were not uncommon in these waters, but to see one stranded like this was unsettling. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do, then quickly reached for his mobile phone and called the local authorities. As he waited, he noticed Marley continuing to bark and dig frantically around the shark's body, occasionally pausing to look out at the water as if sensing something else. Within minutes, a small group of nearby residents, drawn by Marley's persistent barking, gathered around the scene. Some gasped in awe at the sight of the enormous predator lying helpless on the beach. Others quickly ran back to town to alert more people. It wasn't long before a team of marine wildlife rescuers arrived, led by a local marine biologist, Dr. Susan Garner, who had spent years studying the marine life off the coast of Byron Bay. Dr. Garner immediately assessed the situation, noting that the shark was still alive, but in distress. The team sprang into action, using wet towels to keep the shark's skin moist while they strategized on how to return it to the water safely. It was a delicate operation. Great whites were powerful animals, and even a slight movement could injure someone or worsen the shark's condition. As the rescue team worked, Marley continued barking incessantly, now running back and forth between the shark and the shoreline. His unusual behavior caught Dr. Garner's attention. She followed Marley's gaze out to sea, her eyes narrowing as she saw something moving just beyond the waves. A second shark, another great white, was circling in the shallow water, clearly agitated by the activity on shore. The rescuers hadn't anticipated this. It wasn't common for two great whites to be in such proximity, but the storm seemed to have driven them both off course. Dr. Garner quickly called for the team to stay alert. The second shark was much closer to the shore than usual, and its movements were growing more erratic by the minute. As tension mounted, the team realized they needed to work faster. They attached ropes and flotation devices to the stranded shark, hoping to guide it back into the water without further agitating the second shark, which was now pacing restlessly just beyond the surf. Marley, sensing the urgency, stood beside Tom, still focused on the water as if ready to sound the alarm again. With great effort, the rescuers began to move the massive shark toward the waves. The shark, weak but still powerful, thrashed lightly as it was pushed closer to the water. Just as they reached the edge of the surf, the second great white made its move, surging closer to shore as if protecting its stranded companion. The team froze, unsure of how to proceed. The water churned as the two sharks came within striking distance of each other. In that tense moment, Dr. Garner made a quick decision. She ordered the team to continue, knowing that hesitation could cost them the window they had to save the stranded shark. With a final push, The great white was back in the water, its gills opening and closing as it slowly regained strength. The second shark circled protectively before moving away, seemingly satisfied that the first shark was no longer in danger. The team watched in awe as the two great whites swam side by side, disappearing into the deeper waters of the bay. The beach was quiet again, except for the sound of the waves and Marley's soft panting beside Tom. The rescuers, relieved and exhausted, gathered their equipment and took a moment to absorb what had just happened. Dr. Garner couldn't shake the feeling that Marley had somehow been key to the rescue. His barking had not only alerted the town but had also drawn attention to the second shark before it became a more serious threat. It was as if the dog had sensed the delicate balance between life and death playing out on that beach. Over the following days, the town of Byron Bay buzzed with talk of the Great White Rescue. People marveled at how close they had come to disaster and how a golden retriever's instincts had played an unexpected role in saving the sharks, and possibly the rescuers themselves. Dr. Garner used the incident to raise awareness about the importance of respecting wildlife, even predators like great whites, whose presence was vital to the health of the ocean ecosystem. Marley became something of a local hero. His picture splashed across newspapers with headlines calling him the Shark Dog of Byron Bay. Tom, proud but humble, continued his morning walks with Marley along the same stretch of beach, though they both kept a wary eye on the horizon, knowing that the ocean always had more surprises in store. On June 17, 2003, a team of international underwater archaeologists gathered on a small vessel floating in the Red Sea, just off the coast of Egypt. They were a diverse group, brought together by their shared passion for discovering pieces of history buried beneath the sea. Led by Dr. Nadia Qasim, a respected Egyptian marine archaeologist, the team had been exploring a recently discovered ancient shipwreck, believed to date back to the Ptolemaic period. The wreck lay in a relatively deep part of the sea near the Ras Mohammed National Park, a region famous for its vibrant marine life. The day had begun like any other on their expedition. The air was filled with the excitement of what they might uncover that day as the sun rose over the horizon. Dr. Qasim and her team, comprising marine biologists, historians, and experienced divers, were eager to continue their excavation work on the wreck. The previous day had yielded fragments of ancient pottery, bronze tools, and even a small collection of precious stones. They had all the signs of a significant historical find. As the team descended into the depths of the Red Sea, the wreckage of the ancient ship came into view, its remains scattered across the ocean floor. The divers began their work, carefully excavating the site and documenting their findings. Dr. Qasim directed the group from underwater, monitoring the progress of their excavation. Their goal was to recover delicate artifacts while ensuring they didn't damage the fragile wreckage. However, as the team worked, something unusual caught their attention. A group of hammerhead sharks, known for their distinctive wide-set eyes and powerful bodies, appeared in the distance. Hammerheads were a common sight in these waters, and while their presence often stirred nerves among divers, they were typically harmless and shy. The sharks would usually swim past without causing any disruption. But today, something felt different. The hammerheads weren't passing by, they were circling. One particularly large hammerhead, easily the size of a small car, seemed especially focused on the divers. It swam closer, its wide head tilting in the water as it examined the team's equipment. Dr. Qasim signaled for everyone to remain calm, hoping the shark would lose interest and swim away, as they often did. But instead of retreating, the hammerhead's behavior became more erratic. It began making closer passes, brushing against the excavation equipment with its powerful body. One diver, Adam Roy, who had been photographing the site, suddenly found himself caught in the middle of the shark's path. The hammerhead swam toward him with alarming speed, striking the camera rig he was holding and sending him spinning backward. Adam struggled to regain his balance, kicking his fins to right himself as the shark circled back. His heart raced as he tried to stay calm, but the shark was relentless, now targeting the larger pieces of excavation equipment. The other divers quickly realized the danger. The hammerhead's agitation was causing havoc on their delicate operation. As they tried to continue working, the shark's aggression only grew. it rammed into a large metal grid they had placed over the wreck to protect it, sending the grid tumbling across the sea floor. Another diver, Emily Song, barely managed to avoid being hit as the shark thrashed through the excavation site, scattering sediment and damaging equipment. Dr. Kassem, seeing the escalating threat, ordered the team to stop the excavation and begin their ascent. But the hammerhead seemed intent on preventing their retreat. It swam between the divers and their ascent lines, forcing them to maneuver carefully to avoid it. The once peaceful dive had turned into a tense standoff between the archaeologists and the large predator. They had no choice but to rely on their training and instincts to stay safe. As the team slowly made their way to the surface, another diver, Carlos Diaz, noticed something peculiar about the wreckage. While helping Emily avoid the shark's path, he saw strange patterns etched into one of the larger pieces of wood. It wasn't just the remnants of an old ship. It appeared to be a carving depicting marine life in intricate detail. Carlos managed to snap a few quick photos before the hammerhead charged again, forcing him to abandon his position. When the team finally reached the surface, they were shaken but unharmed. The hammerhead had lingered near the wreck for a few minutes before swimming off into the depths. As they climbed aboard the boat, the crew rushed to check on them. Dr. Kassem and her team were breathless, their minds racing with the chaotic events that had just unfolded. Back on the boat, Carlos showed Dr. Kassem the photos he had taken of the carvings. The images revealed ancient depictions of sea creatures, including sharks. Dr. Kassem's curiosity was piqued. Could the wreck have been a part of an ancient marine sanctuary or a ship that had once transported goods related to marine biodiversity? The carvings hinted at a deeper significance to the wreck. Perhaps it had served as a site for studying or preserving marine life in ancient times. As the team reflected on the day's events, Dr. Kassem couldn't shake the feeling that the hammerhead's aggression was connected to something more profound. The marine environment in the Red Sea has been facing increasing stress due to climate change, pollution, and overfishing. The sharks' erratic behavior could be a response to these disruptions, their natural habitats disturbed and their food sources dwindling. The hammerheads, once passive observers, were now being forced into more aggressive actions as their environment shifted around them. The team decided to halt their excavation temporarily, not only to protect themselves but to reassess their approach to working in shark-inhabited waters. They reached out to local marine biologists for advice on how to better coexist with the predators during their research, ensuring that both their excavation and the sharks could proceed without further conflict. The hammerhead shark's unexpected aggression had left a lasting impact on the team, but it had also opened their eyes to the delicate balance between their work and the marine life around them. Dr. Kassem knew that continuing their excavation meant respecting the environment and the creatures that inhabited it. As they prepared to return to the wreck in the coming weeks, they carried with them a deeper understanding of the ocean's power and the importance of preserving both history and the fragile ecosystems that surrounded it. On the morning of August 3, 2005, the town of Cedar Creek, nestled along the banks of the St. Johns River in Florida, was slowly beginning to recover from the worst flooding it had seen in decades. The river, swollen from record-breaking rains, had spilled over its banks, submerging roads, homes, and farmlands. The floodwaters had begun to recede, but the damage was clear. What once was a peaceful riverside town now looked more like a murky, sprawling lake. Jake Foster, a local fisherman in his early 50s, was out in his small boat. Like many others in the town, he had been trying to salvage what he could. The storm had wrecked his boat dock, destroyed his fishing gear, and driven away his usual catch. But today, Jake hoped for a little luck, figuring the waters would be teeming with displaced fish. Jake motored into a familiar bend of the river, casting his lines with the practiced ease of someone who had spent his entire life fishing these waters. The day was overcast, the air heavy with moisture, but Jake was content to be back on the water, away from the chaos of the cleanup efforts in town. Little did he know, the river held something far more dangerous than his usual catch. As Jake sat back in his boat waiting for a bite, he felt an unusual tug on his line. It was strong, much stronger than any fish he'd ever hooked. He braced himself, gripping the rod as whatever was on the other end began pulling with surprising force. Then, without warning, his boat lurched violently to one side. Jake nearly lost his balance, looking over the edge of the boat just in time to see a massive shape flash beneath the surface. Suddenly, the boat rocked again, this time harder. Jake's heart raced as the realization hit him. This wasn't a fish. It was something far bigger and far more dangerous. Before he could react, the creature surged upward, slamming into the side of the boat. Jake gasped as a massive bull shark broke the surface, its powerful body thrashing violently. The shark's thick, muscular frame was terrifyingly close, its jaws snapping at the air before it disappeared back into the murky water. Panic gripped Jake as the bull shark circled his boat, bumping it repeatedly. He had heard stories of bull sharks venturing into freshwater rivers, but they were rare this far upstream. The flooding must have pushed the sharks farther inland, and now they were here, hungry and disoriented. Jake knew he had to get out of there, but the shark wasn't giving him a chance. It rammed the boat again, nearly capsizing it. In a desperate move, Jake started his motor, trying to make a quick escape. But the shark was relentless. It followed him, its fins slicing through the water, its predatory instincts triggered by the boat's movements. With every jolt and splash, Jake's fear grew. He steered his boat toward the shore, his pulse pounding in his ears as the shark continued its pursuit. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jake reached the safety of shallow water. The shark veered off, disappearing back into the depths of the river. Jake scrambled out of the boat, heart still racing, and ran up the bank, shouting for help. Word spread quickly through the small town. A bull shark had attacked Jake Foster on the river. Fear took hold of the residents as more stories began to surface. Swimmers and boaters reporting sightings of large sharks near the docks and along the riverbank. The river, once a source of livelihood and recreation, had become a place of dread. The community was in shock. Bull sharks were known for their ability to survive in both saltwater and freshwater, but their presence this far upstream was unheard of. Something was pushing them out of their usual habitats. And it wasn't just one or two. More sharks were being spotted every day. Local authorities, overwhelmed by the unprecedented situation, called in environmental scientists to investigate. Dr. Eva Santiago, a marine biologist with years of experience studying shark behavior, arrived with her team to assess the situation. She quickly determined that the flooding had dramatically altered the river's ecosystem. The rising waters had pushed the sharks out of their usual hunting grounds, driving them inland in search of food. The disruption had thrown the entire food chain into chaos, forcing the bull sharks to venture into human-inhabited areas. Dr. Santiago and her team worked closely with the town's officials and residents, setting up tracking systems to monitor the sharks' movements. They began tagging the sharks they could capture, studying their behavior in the hopes of finding a way to mitigate the danger. But the situation was more complex than they had anticipated. The flooding had created the perfect storm for these predators, displacing them from their natural habitats and pushing them closer to human settlements. Meanwhile, the community had to adapt. Fishermen like Jake were warned to stay out of the river for the time being, and swimming was strictly prohibited. Patrol boats monitored the river, and warning signs were posted along the shoreline. The people of Cedar Creek had always lived in harmony with the river, but now it had become a source of fear. Every splash, every ripple in the water sent a jolt of anxiety through the town. As the weeks passed, the situation began to stabilize. Dr. Santiago's team made progress in understanding the sharks' movements, and the flooding gradually subsided. But the bull sharks remained in the river, their presence a stark reminder of how quickly nature could turn dangerous in the face of extreme weather events. The town learned to coexist with the sharks, taking precautions but refusing to let fear dictate their lives. Jake, still shaken by his encounter, returned to the river eventually, more cautious but no less determined. The river had been his home for as long as he could remember, and he wasn't about to let a few sharks take that away from him. He, like the rest of the town, had learned that resilience wasn't just about rebuilding after the flood. It was about finding a way to live with the changes that came with it. Dr. Santiago's research helped the community understand that the bull sharks were not invaders. They were survivors, just like the people of Cedar Creek. The flooding had forced them out of their natural habitat, and they were adapting to a world that had been thrown off balance. The town, in turn, had to adapt as well, finding ways to coexist with the predators while working to protect both the sharks and themselves. It was March 21, 2007, and the waters off the Maldives were as beautiful as ever. Tourists and locals alike had gathered for the annual international snorkeling competition near the island of Maal Hosmadulu. This event, famous for its breathtaking reefs, attracted marine enthusiasts from all corners of the globe. Divers, swimmers, and snorkelers were eager to explore the coral gardens filled with fish, rays, and the occasional sighting of white-tip reef sharks, a species generally known for being cautious and peaceful around humans. Among the participants was an experienced marine conservationist named Isabel Fernandez. She had come from Spain to compete, but also to see firsthand how the coral reefs were holding up under the increasing pressures of climate change. Isabel had spent the morning mentally preparing herself for the event, carefully checking her gear and chatting with fellow snorkelers about the excitement of the upcoming competition. The sun was shining, the waters were clear, and spirits were high as everyone set out for what was supposed to be a perfect day in the water. As the competitors took to the water, they marveled at the underwater world before them. Vibrant coral stretched for miles, alive with marine life darting in and out of crevices. Schools of fish danced between the coral branches, and the water hummed with the energy of the ocean. Everything seemed perfect, but Isabel couldn't shake a feeling of unease. She had noticed that the coral wasn't as vibrant as it used to be. It looked paler, almost sickly in some places, a telltale sign of coral bleaching, a phenomenon caused by rising ocean temperatures. Nonetheless, Isabel and the other competitors pushed forward, diving deeper into the reef to complete the challenges set by the event organizers. But as they swam further out, things began to shift. Several competitors started noticing that the white-tip reef sharks, typically shy and calm, were behaving strangely. At first it was just a few sharks circling a little too close for comfort, but soon their behavior escalated. Isabel, who had been photographing the reef, suddenly felt something brush against her leg. She turned quickly, startled to find a white-tip shark swimming directly toward her with unnerving speed. She kicked backward, trying to put some distance between herself and the predator, but the shark didn't back down. Instead, it continued its approach, circling tightly around her. Isabel's heart pounded in her chest as she signaled to the other snorkelers around her to stay alert. It wasn't just one shark behaving this way. Soon, multiple sharks began acting aggressively, darting toward competitors and even bumping into them. Panic spread through the group as more and more participants realized what was happening. The once peaceful reef had become a chaotic, dangerous environment. One snorkeler, a man from Australia, found himself surrounded by 3 sharks that were snapping at the water around him. He frantically swam to the surface, desperately trying to escape, but the sharks followed, their agitation growing by the second. The event organizers, observing from nearby boats, quickly realized the severity of the situation. They signaled for the competitors to return to the boats, initiating emergency protocols. Isabel, struggling to maintain her composure, followed the orders and began swimming back toward the safety of the boat. But the sharks were relentless. One large white tip, its movements erratic and frenzied, rammed into Isabel's camera rig, sending her spinning through the water. She managed to steady herself, but her mind raced with fear. What was driving the sharks to behave this way? The water churned with panic as the competitors tried to escape. The organizers began pulling people out of the water as fast as they could, but the sharks continued to circle, their aggression intensifying with every moment. Isabel was one of the last to reach the boat, her body trembling with adrenaline as she was pulled aboard. She looked back into the water, watching in disbelief as the sharks continued their assault, even after the humans had retreated. Back on the boat, the mood was tense. The competitors were shaken, some still in shock from their close encounters with the sharks. One man had sustained a minor bite on his leg, and several others had bruises from where the sharks had rammed into them. The organizers were at a loss for words, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. White-tip reef sharks weren't known for attacking humans like this, especially during the day when they were typically more docile. Something was clearly amiss. Isabel, still catching her breath, approached Dr. Michael Weber, a marine biologist who had been observing the competition. She expressed her concerns about the shark's behavior and mentioned the coral bleaching she had noticed earlier. Dr. Weber had been studying the impacts of climate change on marine ecosystems for years and knew that environmental stressors could influence shark behavior. Overfishing, pollution, and rising temperatures were all contributing factors to the degradation of coral reefs in the Maldives, and it was becoming increasingly clear that these changes were affecting more than just the coral. Dr. Weber and his team began investigating the incident, gathering data on the reef's condition and the shark populations in the area. They found that the once thriving coral had been severely damaged by bleaching events, which had reduced the availability of food for many marine species. The white-tip reef sharks, struggling to find prey in their usual feeding grounds, were becoming increasingly territorial and aggressive, a behavior driven by the scarcity of resources in their rapidly changing habitat. The organizers of the snorkeling competition decided to cancel the rest of the event, prioritizing the safety of the participants and the preservation of the reef. For many of the competitors, it was a disappointing end to what should have been an incredible experience, but they couldn't ignore the message that had been sent by the ocean that day. The incident with the white-tip reef shark served as a wake-up call to everyone involved. The ocean's ecosystems were under immense stress, and the consequences were becoming more evident every day. The chaos of that day wasn't just a freak occurrence. It was a sign of a deeper problem, one that required immediate action. On a late August morning in 2009, a group of eco-tourists set out on an adventure through the mangrove tunnels of the Florida Everglades, and the day started much like any other in this lush region, with the air thick and the waterways calm. For the 8 tourists, including a biology student named Leah Reynolds and a photographer named Jack Thornton, it was meant to be a peaceful exploration of one of the most unique ecosystems in the world. Led by David Marcus, a seasoned guide familiar with every twist and turn of the Everglades, the group was excited to witness wildlife and enjoy the untouched beauty of the mangroves. By mid-morning, the group had paddled deep into the mangroves, marveling at the intricate network of roots and the dense greenery that surrounded them. The Everglades were teeming with life, home to everything from manatees and alligators to a variety of bird species and occasionally nurse sharks. The tourists knew these sharks to be generally calm, slow-moving creatures that posed little threat to humans. Today, however, something felt different. As they ventured deeper into the tunnels, Leah noticed a disturbance beneath the surface of the water. A large nurse shark swam slowly by her kayak, brushing against the side of her boat. At first, it seemed like a lucky encounter, but as the shark circled back, its behavior began to change. Instead of drifting away, it returned with more intensity, moving aggressively and bumping her kayak with force. Leah's excitement turned to unease, but she kept calm, hoping the shark would lose interest. Yet the shark didn't leave. It circled closer and closer, this time bumping into another tourist's kayak. Leah could sense the growing tension within the group. The nurse shark, normally a passive animal, was behaving in a way that no one had anticipated. The water around them grew more disturbed as more nurse sharks appeared, swimming quickly in erratic patterns. Jack tried to capture the scene with his camera, but even he felt the urgency to paddle away as the sharks' movements became more aggressive. The nurse sharks were not backing down. What had been a calm exploration now turned into a tense struggle to escape the increasingly hostile waters. One shark rammed into Leah's kayak with enough force to nearly tip it over, and as Jack paddled toward her to help, another shark slammed into his boat, throwing him into the water. Panic surged through the group as Jack splashed, trying to pull himself back into his kayak while the sharks continued to circle. The group moved quickly to help Jack back into his kayak, managing to get him to safety just as the sharks closed in again. Though shaken, Jack wasn't seriously hurt, but the intensity of the sharks' behavior had everyone on edge. The once docile nurse sharks seemed agitated, territorial, and unusually aggressive, forcing the group to rethink their approach. As the group began to paddle away from the mangroves, the sharks pursued them, following with relentless persistence. The usually calm waterways had become a place of danger, with the tourists paddling as fast as they could to distance themselves from the aggressive animals. With every stroke of their paddles, the sense of urgency grew. The maze of tunnels had turned into a challenge of survival as the group navigated through the narrow passages, hoping the sharks would give up their pursuit. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the group made it out of the tightest part of the tunnels, reaching a broader section of the water. Here, the sharks began to fall back, retreating into the shadows of the mangroves. The tourists slowed their pace, exhausted but relieved to be out of immediate danger. The once serene mangrove environment now felt ominous, and the group paddled in silence as they processed what had just happened. Later that day, back on solid ground, David and the group reflected on the encounter. Nurse sharks were known for being harmless, so what had caused such aggressive behavior? David, experienced in the ways of the Everglades, had never seen anything like it. He reached out to marine biologists and environmental experts to understand the situation. What they discovered was troubling. The Everglades, like many other ecosystems, had been under increasing stress due to pollution, habitat loss, and climate change. The delicate balance of the mangrove environment was being disrupted, leading to changes in the behavior of the wildlife. The fish populations in the area had been declining as a result of both overfishing and environmental degradation. The nurse sharks, finding themselves with fewer food sources, were becoming more defensive, protecting the limited resources they had left. The typically passive animals had been pushed to aggression by the conditions of their environment, a direct result of the changes humans had inflicted upon the Everglades. The encounter left a lasting impact on everyone involved. Leah, Jack, and the other tourists returned home with a newfound respect for the Everglades and the creatures that lived there. What had started as a peaceful journey through the mangroves had turned into a lesson on the fragility of ecosystems and the unintended consequences of human activity. David, shaken by the experience, vowed to adjust the way he conducted his tours. He knew that the Everglades were changing, and with it the behavior of the wildlife. He planned to educate future tourists, not just on the beauty of the mangroves, but on the urgent need for conservation and sustainable practices to protect the delicate balance of the ecosystem. On a crisp morning in October 2011, the marine research vessel Ocean Voyager was stationed off the coast of South Africa, roughly 20 miles from Durban. The team on board was comprised of marine biologists, oceanographers, and a few seasoned deckhands, all dedicated to studying tiger shark migration patterns in the region. The waters around South Africa were known for their abundant shark populations, and the team had been tracking these apex predators for months, collecting invaluable data for their research on how climate change was affecting marine life. Leading the expedition was Dr. Helena Cruz, a marine biologist in her 40s, known for her sharp focus and calm demeanor. Alongside her were her colleagues, Jonah Murdoch, a passionate young researcher, and Thandi Mbeki, an experienced South African oceanographer. Their research had been progressing smoothly, with hours spent observing tiger sharks from afar, tagging them, and gathering data on their movements. But that morning something felt off. The usual serene rhythm of the research had taken a back seat to an unsettling tension. Around mid-morning, while the crew was deploying a data collection buoy into the water, one of the crew members spotted a large tiger shark circling the vessel. Tiger sharks were not uncommon in these waters, but this one was larger than most they had encountered, measuring close to 14 feet. Its broad body moved with purpose as it swam closer to the boat, its dorsal fins slicing through the water. The crew had seen plenty of sharks before, but this one seemed unusually focused on the boat itself. As the team continued their work, the tiger shark's behavior became more aggressive. It started bumping against the ship, targeting the equipment that dangled over the sides. The crew watched, puzzled and tense. Jonah, who was working on attaching tracking devices to the buoys, felt the first impact when the shark rammed the ship with enough force to make the boat shudder. Startled, he looked overboard to see the massive shark circling just below the surface. Helena, noticing the change in the shark's behavior, instructed the crew to pull the equipment back onto the ship. The shark, however, wasn't done. As they hoisted the equipment out of the water, the shark made another pass, slamming into the side of the vessel with alarming strength. The team scrambled to secure the gear, but the shark wasn't relenting. It continued to circle aggressively, ramming the ship again and again as if trying to defend its territory or eliminate a perceived threat. By midday, the tension had grown palpable. The crew had pulled all non-essential equipment back onto the ship, but the shark remained a menace. It rammed the vessel's stern, targeting the ship's rudder and thrusters, causing the boat to sway violently with each hit. The situation quickly shifted from mere curiosity to fear for their safety. A vessel this size shouldn't have been rattled by a single shark, but the relentless force of the tiger shark's repeated attacks was pushing the ship's limits. Thandi and Helena gathered data from the shark's movements, trying to make sense of its behavior. They hypothesized that the shark's aggression might be linked to the changing conditions in the ocean. South African waters had been warming due to climate change, and with the decline in fish populations caused by overfishing, the sharks were becoming increasingly desperate for food. Perhaps the shark had mistaken the equipment for prey, or perhaps it was simply stressed by the encroaching human presence in its habitat. Meanwhile, the crew on deck was struggling to protect the vessel. The tiger shark made several more aggressive passes, slamming into the hull and even breaching slightly as it snapped at the boat's side, trying to bite through the metal cables still trailing from the deck. Jonah and a few others worked quickly to pull the last remaining cables from the water. But the shark lunged again, its jaws grazing one of the cables before diving back beneath the surface. Helena realized they needed to act fast. The shark wasn't going to give up, and the damage it was causing could potentially cripple their ability to navigate safely. She ordered the team to deploy the shark deterrent system they had on board, a set of devices designed to emit low-frequency sounds that disoriented and repelled sharks. The crew quickly activated the system, hoping it would drive the aggressive predator away. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. The shark continued its assault, ramming the ship and circling just out of reach. Then, slowly, the deterrent began to take effect. The tiger shark swam farther from the ship, its movements less aggressive. It seemed disoriented by the sound waves, finally turning away from the vessel and swimming back into the deeper waters. Relief washed over the crew, but the damage had been done. The ship had sustained multiple hits to its lower hull and rudder, making navigation difficult. The team quickly realized they would have to cut their mission short and head back to shore for repairs. It was a disappointing end to the expedition, but the safety of the crew came first. As they made their slow journey back to Durban, Helena and Thandi pored over the data they had collected. The shark's behavior, while alarming, was a clear indicator of the changing conditions in the ocean. Rising sea temperatures combined with decreasing prey availability were driving predators like tiger sharks to act in increasingly desperate ways. These animals were adapting to a world that was rapidly changing, and in doing so, they were becoming more unpredictable, even dangerous. Once back on shore, Helena prepared a report detailing the encounter. The incident was more than just a freak occurrence. It was a sign of how environmental changes were affecting not only the behavior of marine life, but also the safety of those who studied it. The team's research took on a new urgency. It wasn't just about tracking migration patterns anymore. It was about understanding how climate change was pushing these animals to the brink, altering their behavior in ways that could have significant consequences for both humans and marine ecosystems. The tiger shark encounter became a turning point for the team. Their research continued, but with a greater focus on the impact of environmental stressors on shark behavior. They knew that the ocean was changing, and with it, the creatures that called it home. The encounter had shown them firsthand the challenges they would face in a world where the balance between humans and nature was becoming increasingly fragile.